everybody, and welcome to another episode of Book Goodies, our author podcast series. And my name is Deborah Carney. I'm your host, and today I'm joined by author Alina Adams. Hi, Alina. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm talking to a lot of really cool authors during this series, and I just can't wait to see what you have to add to it because I'm really excited about some of the projects all these folks are working on. Why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners and give them an idea about who you are and what you do?
Well, as you said, my name is Alina Adams. I started off in very traditional publishing. I wrote romance novels, Regencies for Avons. I wrote contemporary romances for Dell. I did a series of figure skating murder mysteries for Berkeley Prime Crime. I did some soap opera tie-ins when I was working for As the World Turns and Guiding Light, the Procter & Gamble soap operas. And then last year, as technology sort of moved into a brave new world, I got the rights back to many of my books, the romances and the figure skating mysteries, and I'm re-releasing them independently. But rather than just being electronic books, I'm actually releasing them as enhanced electronic books.
That sounds absolutely fascinating. I would like you to explain to our readers what that actually means.
Well, for instance, with the figure skating mysteries, I had 5 that I did for Berkeley Prime Crime: Murder on Ice, On Thin Ice, Axle of Evil, Death Drop, and Skate Crime. I took each one of those books and I made a deal with the Ice Theater of New York, who are America's premier ice dancing company, staffed with professional ice skaters who have appeared at nationals and at the Olympics. And they gave me access to their entire video library. So I was able to go through the video that they had available, and I was able to pick clips that worked with the stories that I had already written. I was actually working backwards. Usually, when I worked at ABC Sports in their figure skating department, the line was always write to picture. Well, in this case, I had the writing, and I had to get the pictures to go for it. And I found some terrific clips, some professional ice skating performances that matched what I had written in my book. So now when you're reading the figure skating mysteries, you can get along to a point in the story where someone is skating and you can click a link and you can watch that skating performance right there in the middle of the book.
And now you had told me prior to the podcast that links out to YouTube. If you're listening on a Kindle, if you're reading the book on a Kindle and you don't have a wireless connection, is that going to make it so that you can't watch the clip right then? Do you need to be connected, or does it download?
Yes, you do. You need to be connected to the internet, and you wouldn't be able to watch on a traditional Kindle, but you would be able to watch on a Kindle Fire, and you would be able to watch on a Nook Color. What you can also do is you can just get the Kindle app or the Nook app for your laptop, for your desktop, for your phone. I've heard people who are watching on their phones, and then as long as you have a connection, then you can watch the video.
True. I forgot about phones. Yeah, they're connected all the time, so you can stream the video right there on your phone.
Yes, it's surprising how many people have actually told me that they do most of their reading on their phones these days.
Well, and a year ago, I would have argued with you that I would never read a book on my phone and that I would never read a book on a Kindle either. And I went ahead and took the plunge and downloaded the Kindle app to my Mac computer and downloaded a couple of books. And I happened to be laid up for a couple of days with a broken toe. And I'm like, all right, well, there isn't anything in the house that I haven't read yet. Maybe I'll give this, doohickey a try, and I'll actually, my daughter had been using a Sony reader for years and loved it. So I sat down and I actually read a novel by James Patterson, and I was like, wow, I really can do this. This is high enough resolution. This is cool.
What I love about it is just the fact that you can have 200 books in a device, especially for the subway or for airplanes. It's the best because, usually when I was packing for a plane trip, I'd have to get, well, here's my serious novel in case I'm in a serious mood, and here's my genre in case I'm in a genre mood. And with this, you have all these choices. Also, I've heard from a lot of older readers what they love is that they can make the font size whatever they need it to be.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that I tell new authors is not to worry about your font size and to not use a fancy font. And I will then show them, if they don't believe me, I'll show them on the Kindle how that you can make it bigger, you can change the font to what's easier for you to read, and you can even change the paper color. You can be reading black on white, which is, default, or you can read black on cream or white on black.
Right. Another thing is not to worry too much about is layout. I mean, obviously you want a nice clean layout, but the fact is you have no idea how people are going to be reading it, whether they're going to be holding it horizontally, whether they're going to be holding it vertically, how big they'll make the font. It's important not to obsess about that because in an interesting twist of fate, after how many hundred years since Gutenberg, we really don't have any control over that anymore.
Yeah. That's really funny because I do a lot of work with using Gutenberg texts. And the whole reading on your phone thing. Now, I have a Kindle. Like you said, I've got, a couple hundred books on there, and I've been spending a lot of time in doctors' offices because I live in New York City, and there's only so many doctors, and they tend to overbook. So it's usually, if I have a 1 o'clock appointment, I will be seen by 4 o'clock.
Yes, I always know it's going to be, you either can get there 2 hours early or you can get there on time and wait for 2 hours. But that 2 hours is going to happen.
It's going to happen no matter what. So I'm able to bring my Kindle, and I can either play Angry Birds, which I get bored with, or I can read. And I don't have to, like you said, I don't have to decide ahead of time. Years ago when I took my kids to the doctors, I would bring a book that I only had like a couple chapters left to read. And then you're done. And you're like, okay, now I got to carry this book around with me, and I'm done, and I have nothing else to read. So between the phone, the Kindle app for the phone, and, the Kindle itself, that gives you a way to read. And the resolution on the screens is so much better now.
Yes, much.
That it makes things readable on your phone. And people watch entire movies on their phones now. I don't like that
I can't quite get.
Yeah, I don't want to see.
If it's a science fiction movie or something that you really need to see it. I mean, if it's some small, intimate 2-person indie, maybe. But I don't get the whole blockbuster on your phone thing.
No. If I'm going to see Tom Hanks or Matthew McConaughey, I want to see him on a big screen.
You want to see them larger than life.
Larger than life, or at least on my MacBook Pro and not on my Android Droid X or whatever the heck it is I have. So, all right. So we have the enhanced versions of the books, and in addition to enhancing with video, you were telling me that you can also enhance in other ways.
Yes, that's one of the things I've done. One of my romance novels, When a Man Loves a Woman, which was released by Dell in 2000, what I did was I went and I gave each of the chapters a name that corresponded to a popular song. So when you get to a chapter heading, you can, again, click a link and listen to the song, and it will either comment on something that's going on in the story or complement something that's going on in the story. So I created an original soundtrack for When a Man Loves a Woman. In addition, I worked with another author, Dan Ellis. She's written many, many children's books. His very first book was called The Worldwide Dessert Contest. In addition to being a children's author, Dan Ellis also writes for musical theater. He was one of the people involved in Jason Robert Brown's musical 13, which played on Broadway a few years ago. And he had written an original musical score to go with the Worldwide Dessert Contest. So what we did was we incorporated the music into the book. So once again, you're reading the story and you get to a key point, and the book is a fantasy. It's a very fun fantasy. Publishers Weekly called it Charlie and the Chocolate Factory meets Homer Price Donut Maker. So it's got a lot of very fun rhymes, and you can click a button and now you can listen to the songs that were professionally recorded by professional musical theater singers, and you can read a story and get a completely original musical theater score all in one.
That's really, really, really incredible. And that's what is setting some, authors and book producers apart from everybody else. And, not every book has to have a musical soundtrack, but the ones that do, that are appropriate, I think that's wonderful. Because you read to relax.
Right. Well, I gave a talk to the New York Writers Union a few months ago, and one of the things that I said was just because a book can be enhanced doesn't necessarily mean that it should be.
Yep.
The idea really is to take projects that would be enhanced, made better by what we're doing. For instance, I did another project where, as I mentioned, I worked for Procter & Gamble Productions and their two soap operas, As the World Turns and Guiding Light. And before that, I was at ABC Daytime, who also have their soap operas. And before that, I was at E! Entertainment on a show called Pure Soap. So I have been basically in and out of the soap world for about almost 20 years now. And as soaps are not at their best times these days. Many of them have been canceled. All My Children is off the air. One Life to Live is off the air. As the World Turns is off the air. Guiding Light is off the air. I created a book that was called Soap Opera 451, a time capsule of daytime drama's greatest moments. What I did was, first of all, I crowdsourced the book, and that I went to the fans using my blog, Soap Opera 451, using my Twitter, and I asked fans what they thought were the greatest, most memorable moments from the past 70 years of daytime drama. Then, once I had their suggestions, I took the most popular ones and I went to the actors, to the writers, to the producers who'd been involved in creating those moments, and I interviewed them about them. Mm-hmm. I compiled the interviews into a book, but then I took it to the next level in that I put links in the book where you can click a button and then go watch the scene that they're talking about.
Oh, wow.
In this case, the enhancement I felt was vital because I'm one of those people, I love reading behind-the-scenes things about movies and television and all sorts of things and music, but often I'll read an interview with someone and I want to see it right now because they've just talked about it.
Right.
So I was able to put together this project, Soap Opera 451, a time capsule of daytime drama's greatest moments, where the enhancement, I think, was absolutely vital to making the project work because it's not just reading the interviews, it's seeing the actual scenes.
Wow. That's I want to go get that.
And you should. It's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
I'll go to Amazon and grab it. I did you list that when you gave me your pitch? I don't remember seeing that one. For those of you that don't know, I'm doing a series of podcasts with people that I was able to reach out to through a daily, I don't know what you want to call it, but a daily newsletter that tells people that syncs up people that are looking for sources with people who would like to be on a source. And I put out a query for authors, and I got over 100 replies. So I'm in the middle of a podcasting marathon with a lot of really, really cool authors. And I tried to make sure that I read enough about each one so that I would know cool things like what you just told us about. So now, what are you working on now? What's your current project?
Well, I also have another book that I did in 1998 for Avon called Annie's Wild Ride. And the way that the book was originally structured is that it's intercalary chapter. One chapter takes place in the present, one chapter takes place in the past. Okay. So what I'm doing with that one is, because of technology, I can now offer readers the option. They can read the book the way it was originally published, or they can click a button and read the whole thing in chronological order, which I think completely changes the narrative. And I know a lot of people are very nervous about having their narrative played around with, and it's very possible that I'm very wrong, but I think it makes it fun where you have that option that you can read it either the way it was originally presented or chronologically. In addition, I'm doing another project, and this one is an original. This one wasn't previously published. It's called Counterpoint, an interactive family saga. Back when I was at Procter & Gamble, I developed a project for them that was called Another World Today, which took one of their former soap operas, Another World, that used to air on NBC, and it continued the story. But the twist was that at the end of every episode, there was a poll that viewers and readers could vote on to tell me where they wanted the story to go, and I would write the story based on what their feedback was. So what I'm doing with Counterpoint and Interactive Family Saga is the exact same thing. I wrote Volume 1, and Volume 1 is available right now. And at the end of it, there's a link to a message board you can go to and my Alina Adams Media Facebook page where people can go and tell me what they want to happen next. And Volume 2 is going to be based on their feedback, at the end of which they can again offer feedback. And Volume 3 will be written based on their feedback, and so on and so on. So once again, I may be completely wrong, or I may be biting off much more than I can chew, but I'm very excited about it because it's new, and as a reader, I'm one of those people who, if you don't like how a book ends, other than throwing it against the wall, there's really very little you can do. So I'd like to empower the readers, and I'm trying to do that with Counterpoint and Interactive Family Saga.
That's really interesting because that's actually what I was going to do with a book that my son wrote and that I did a lot of editing in. It's called Animal Kingdom Jaguar Return of the Jaguar. And it's a fantasy. It's a science fiction fantasy, and I'm not a science fiction fantasy writer. I'm about to be, but I'm not yet. And I could tell throughout the book that there were little clues about what was going to be in the sequel. And I had a few people read it, and a couple people told me that they didn't have enough of an emotional connection to one character over the other. And what I was going to do was actually, at the end of the book, have people go to the website, tell me who was their favorite character, who should be in the sequel, and what were some of their favorite parts of the book. And I didn't follow through with that, and I think that I actually need to do that because I would like I know in my mind how I think it needs to go, and because he was my son, I kind of know how he, why he left those clues and why they would go the way they are. But to get people interactive into your books, I think is going to be the next step. Especially with the electronics and the way people like to be able to, we used to read a book and like you said, you either throw it against the wall because you didn't like the ending, because you can't get in touch with the author. You can't say, hey, where's the sequel and why did you kill that one off and you better bring him back, or there was that was it. That was all you had. But in today's society, people are so used to being so connected to each other that it's a logical next step for an author to, especially an author that wants to be able to engage their audience, to step outside of your ego and say, how did you like the book and what were your favorite parts and what do you think should happen next?
Well, as I said, I'm sorry to interrupt, but as I said, my background is in soap operas, and soap operas go on for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, so there's constant adjustment of the storyline based on fan reaction. There is an end game, but it isn't necessarily always where you go. There's so many U-turns you could take. The fact is Luke and Laura, the world-famous Luke and Laura from General Hospital, were not originally supposed to get together. It was just the chemistry of the actors and the popularity of Tony Geary. So to me, I sort of came up and got my training in an industry where you have to listen to the fans, and there's no such thing as this is the author's vision, I'm not going to budge from it.
Yep. And that's really awesome. And now when you were traditionally published, obviously that was your only choice back then. And you said you've gotten back the rights to a lot of your manuscripts. And is that because you wanted to go indie because you knew now that there were these other things you would be able to do with them? Or was it just that they were done publishing them and, you wanted to revive them?
Well, here's what happened with the Skating Mystery series, which was the first one that I did. I actually went back to the editor who had worked on the books. She's a big skating fan. I explained to her, I have this deal with the Ice Theater of New York. I'll even... And by I mean my husband, and I just mostly stand over his shoulder and criticize, but he's the one who builds my books for me. And I said, we will even build them, and we will hand them to you, and you can just re-release them. And she really liked the idea, and it went up a few layers at the publishing house, and they just weren't ready for it. Mm-hmm. And I really felt like I had the idea, I had the material, the books were already written. Right. I just really wanted to get them out there, and the way to do it ended up me doing it on my own.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why a lot of people are independently publishing, and for the authors listening, that's one of the big differences between using a traditional publishing house and using either a small press or using just releasing them totally yourself, is that you have more control. So
right. Well, to be fair, one thing that I can say is that the books that I had already been edited, in the sense that I wasn't just taking a manuscript and putting it out there. These were all books that had gone through the editorial process in a large publishing house. So I was a bit ahead of the game from someone who might just have a manuscript, and then I knew that these books had been vetted in a certain sense and were ready to go. It was really just a matter of adding the enhancements and physically building them.
Mm-hmm. And I love that, because you're repurposing content, which is another thing that I preach to people all the time.
Oh, yes. I'm big on that.
Yeah. If you already have things written, whether you have a blog that's 5 years old that you have, you've written about cooking for the last 5 years, 3 blog posts a month, or, 1 a week or whatever, and you have all this content, you don't have to reinvent yourself. You can take the best of your content and put it together, rework it, and create a book.
Well, I always tell when authors come to me about the possibility of working to do an enhanced ebook, one of the things that I tell them is that if you put this up, and even if you make $5 a month, that's $5 you didn't have before.
Yes.
So there really is no downside to it. The only possible downside that I can see is if people put out material that isn't quite ready.
Yes.
And people read it and feel that they're not an author that they enjoy, then 5 years from now, when the author is ready and polished and seasoned, they may have turned off a portion of their potential audience. That's really the only downside that I can see. But the fact is, you can be J.K. Rowling, and there's people who don't like Harry Potter. You can be Dan Brown, and there's a lot of people who don't like Dan Brown. So the fact is, and this is not me insulting Dan Brown. I've personally never read his work. I just hear things. Right. But the fact is, being published by a major house in no way saves you from writing something that someone won't like, because I assure you, someone won't like it.
Yeah. And, who's to say that if J.K. Rowling were starting out now instead of, when she did, that she would have probably taken the independent publishing route, because so many people turned her down at the beginning.
Well, look what she's doing with Pottermore. This is something completely different, but talk about someone who gets where publishing is going, or at least what a multimedia platform could be in conjunction with books in print and other things.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's brilliant. For those of you that don't know, J.K. Rowling built her own world, and it's at Pottermore.com.
Yes, and she's in control of it. This is not going through her publisher. This is all her. Yep. So in a way, you can say J.K. Rowling has gone independent.
Yep, she's gone indie, and she's done it in a way that her fans and her fan base can interact with her. And, she's a very private person and never really liked doing interviews and everything anyway. So this is a way for her to be out there without having to be out there.
And it's controlling her own universe.
Yes.
She can control it and write whatever additional material she wants and whatever interactivity she wants. It's a quality control issue as well.
Yep. And she doesn't have to publish a full novel again. She can just write stories from here until eternity. She can just write stories, have people give their input on them, and just go from there. And I think that's something that new authors need to be aware of. Probably most of them aren't ready for that yet, because, again, you need to be able to put good work out there. You can't just slap something up and say, oh, I think this would be fun, and boom, and then expect, immediate adoption of the idea.
You can do that and know what the consequences to such an action would be. That's the whole thing.
Exactly. So, one point that you brought up is all of your work is professionally edited, and almost every author that I've interviewed in the series so far, except for one, has said that they have used outside editors. And if they're independently published people, they are authors that have established a relationship with an editor that understood their writing and their writing style, and that was a good fit for them to work with. So they weren't, given to an editor in a big publishing house that may not have the same vision that they do. They were actually able to interview editors and come up with editors that were good for them. But every single one of them had an editor that gave them, feedback and deep editing, not just copy editing, but
Well, the funny thing about that with copy editing is, I'll tell you, because I've been going through my previously published books, and once I had them scanned and turned into electronic books, you have to go through it and you have to check, because there's tons of mistakes. No matter how good of a scanning program it is, you have to go through it. And I used a printed copy of the book as a reference so I could check when I wasn't sure about something. And sure enough, there has not been a single one of my books released by a major New York publisher that me going over it with a fine-tooth comb, I have not found mistakes that ended up in the printed version.
And that's awesome, because
that's just sad, but
that's and it's a sign of professionalism, and it's also a sign that that you're interested in what the reader wants, and not just following your own ego and saying, this is what I want to say, and screw the rest of you, I don't care if you get it or not. And
coming from television, the attitude in television is really very, very different than it is in books, because television is a mass medium and it's a commercial medium, and no one, not even David E. Kelley or anybody else or Aaron Sorkin, can completely ignore the fact that they're writing for a mass commercial medium, and they have to listen to the people who embrace their work. So I think coming from TV has actually been very beneficial for me in that respect, because I never came from a theory. Also, I never came from one person. It's one person's voice, because any television show has so many people, writers, directors, actors. It's a simple thing as, an actress gets pregnant and you have to rewrite the whole story. So you're always ready to turn on a dime. So I think I was very fortunate in that so much of my background is in television, that I came in with a slightly different attitude than I think a lot of people come into traditional novel writing, in that I'm ready to collaborate. In fact, I love to collaborate. I love hearing how people respond to my work and where they think it should go next. And honestly, I got to tell you, and this isn't just a matter of blowing smoke, I've had readers come up with some fantastic ideas where they've made a connection between 2 points, and I went, wow, why didn't I see that? That's perfect. Mm-hmm. So the thing is, I don't reluctantly do that. I love doing that. And that's with Counterpoint, the book that I'm doing interactively, that's part of the fun for me. It's not something I'm gritting my teeth through. It's something I'm loving.
Yep. And that is so perfect, because, again, there are a lot of writers who, possibly rightly so, they want to tell their story and they want to tell it their own way. Don't be discouraged if that's what you want to do, but you do need to be open to the new lines of communication that you need to have with your readership that you didn't have to have before. I don't know, if you come up with a writer from the, the 40s or the 50s that wrote classics, you can't go back and tell them how you would like the story to be. But in today's society, a new author that comes out, or an established author like yourself that rebrings something out, you need to be ready to take the backlash from whatever you do, because now people can get you. Not get you. I'm sorry. People can get to you in a way that they can communicate with you. They can go to your message board. They can go to your Twitter. They can go to your Facebook account. They can get their point across to you, where in the past that wasn't possible. Writers were more isolated.
Right. Well, not only that, but simply look at the traditional process. Maybe you wrote the full manuscript. Maybe you just wrote a proposal. You sent it off to publishers. Let's lose the agent part of the equation, where you're sending it out to agents. You're sending it out to publishers. That's at least maybe 6 months on a good turnaround. Mm-hmm. You get offered a contract. You finish writing the book. I mean, when I wrote my soap opera tie-ins, because soaps move so quickly, they had to be written very quickly. They basically had to be written in 6 weeks. So I produced the entire manuscript in 6 weeks. It was edited. It's still, by the time it was typeset and copy edited and printed and shipped and on the shelves, it was about a year later. Now, if you're writing soap operas, this is a bit of a problem, because the character who was dead when I wrote the book was alive by the time it was published. So that was a minor little problem. But the fact is, and we had done it on what was considered a very fast turnaround, basically about a year. Most people, with a traditional book that doesn't have a hard deadline to hit, like it has to, mesh with a story or a particular date, it's easily 2 years from the start of the process to the end. So even if you want to take input, how are you going to do that?
Right. And there you go. A lot of self-published people that I've been interviewing have been bringing up the point that, they want to talk about something contemporary. And when they approach traditional publishers about it, it was by the time the book was going to come out, the thing that they did the book about is going to be over with. Nobody's going to remember.
Right.
So, like you said, with the soap operas, if you wait a year, the whole storyline, this person was dead and now they came back and now they got kids and, the whole story is completely different than it was a year ago. I think that's fascinating that you worked in the soap opera industry. I'll share a story with you later after we're off the call. So if you had something that you wanted to tell a beginning author, what would you tell them?
Well, the first thing I would tell them is something that I think goes against all advice that's usually given. Usually they tell you, write the book of your heart. I'm like, that's nice. You can write the book of your heart when you're a bestseller. You got to look around and you got to see what's selling and you got to know who your market is. One of the things with the figure skating mysteries is, in addition to working in soaps, I also spent several years I worked for ABC Sports for their coverage of nationals and the World Championships. I was at the 1998 Nagano Olympics for TNT. I've worked for ESPN. So I was very familiar with the skating world. Not only was I familiar with the skating world from the point of view of working in the skating world, but I was very familiar with the skating world from the point of I knew all the editors at all the magazines. I knew the websites. I knew where the fandom was. I knew where my audience was. Mm-hmm. It's exactly the same thing with the soaps, in that when I wrote the book and when I produced the book, I knew where my audience was. I knew where to find them. I had some idea of how to approach them. Nobody ever really in marketing knows really how to approach them. But that was the key. And I would tell a beginning author, if you just want to write a book for fun that you love and you want to put it up there and you want to see what happens, that's great. I would certainly never stop anybody from doing that. But if you want to look at this as a career, if you want to treat this as something professional, then you really, before you even write the book, you need to know where your audience is.
I think that's brilliant. That is a point that hadn't been brought up yet. So that's really cool.
And the other thing which ties into where your audience is if you're going to write in a genre or you're going to write about the field, you better love that field. Because people and readers can absolutely see when you're faking it. When people say, I think I'll write a romance because those sell really well. And I've never read one, but I'm going to head and write one because I think that's what people want to buy and maybe it'll have vampires in it. Or I think I'll write a mystery because Sherlock Holmes did it, so how hard could it be? That's not going to work. I mean, okay, maybe if you're a genius, maybe it will. But on the off chance that you are not a genius, writing in a genre that you are not familiar with, that you don't love, that you maybe even a little bit hold in contempt because you think it's so easy that anybody could whip this out in a weekend, gonna work.
Yeah. I was going to try doing that whole romance thing. I was going to have a group of girls get together and have a slumber party and have wine and have us cooperatively write a romance in a weekend. It didn't happen, and I don't think it would be able to work even if we tried.
Well, if there are people who love the genre, I think if you've been reading romance novels for 20 years, there is absolutely nothing wrong with you trying to write one. Will your first one be saleable? Probably not. But the fact is, it will definitely not be saleable if you just try to write something. It's the flip side of what I said about the marketing. On the one hand, you must absolutely know where your audience is. But on the other hand, if you just write for an audience without being a part of that audience, I think that will come through, and I don't think it will create a very good work.
That's excellent advice as well, because I do know some folks that, are getting into areas that they don't necessarily have a background in, and that's one of the things that you want to do is make sure that if you're going to write about your main character being an airline pilot, you better know something about airline pilots and how the world works, or people are going to see right through you.
Well, to be fair, my book, Annie's Wild Ride, does have 2 Air Force pilots in it, and I later received an email informing me that I had completely skipped to the part where they go to flight school. But the thing is, on the other hand, it was a romance where they're going to flight school was really not the point. Right. It was just the setting, and it was about 2 people who met at the Air Force Academy and then became military pilots. So if I had been writing nonfiction or maybe even a Tom Clancy-like thriller, that might have had more of a relevance. But I would like to say right now, mea culpa, I am very sorry that I skipped the part where they go to flight school.
That was just not part of the romance. We just took those weeks off and skipped ahead in time.
Exactly.
All right. Well, this is all really, really great information. I love the way you are very animated and are able to share things with people and get your point across, which, that's another thing. In addition to being a good author, you're a good speaker. And
I talk about myself.
One of the things with the BookGoodies podcast is that we're trying to give authors a voice. And instead of just giving you, a form to fill out, which is, a flat way of getting to know authors, we give you a chance to get your voice and your opinions and let your readers get to know you. And it sounds like you're going to let your readers get to know you whether you're on podcasts or not, because you're going to throw a little something here and there into the book that's going to really make yourself accessible and be interactive.
Well, not only am I going to let the readers get to know me, I really would like to get to know them. As I said, the links in Counterpoint, an interactive family saga, they go to a message board, they go to the Alina Adams Media Facebook page. So I think in that way, we're going to get to know each other.
I think that's great. And the message board sends them to Facebook, or how do they go to one or the other, or how does that work?
It's one or the other. Basically, at the end of the book, you have two options, because despite what Mark Zuckerberg would like us to think, not everyone on the planet is on Facebook. So I give people the option. They can go to Facebook, which is Alina Adams Media, or they can go to the Soap Opera 451 message board, which is a message board that goes with a blog of mine that I use for a lot of my creative writing projects.
That's awesome. I love that, because, again, it's the interactivity that's going to make you grow as an author, and that is going to make your readership and your fan base grow. The most famous actors and the best, the most popular ones are the ones that make themselves accessible at some level.
I think all creative people these days have to be, and I know there's some people who don't like it, but the fact is there have always been, for instance, actors who hate doing interviews, and they don't understand that it's part of the job and there's consequences. And I don't judge them for whether they like it or not, but the fact is that has consequences. And I think in this day and age, every single creative person has to understand that a part of the job is putting yourself out there. From the Stephen Sondheim Sunday in the Park with George, there's a song, Putting It Together, that Barbra Streisand also recorded. And one of the lines is she talks about so that you can go on exhibition, and then she stops and corrects herself, so that your work can go on exhibition, which is nice and great, but I really don't think that was ever true. This song was written, I'm sure more Sondheim fans will correct me whether it was written in the 70s or the 80s, but it was written 30 years ago, and it's even truer today. It would be nice if just your work could go on exhibition, but the fact is now it's a whole package.
Yeah, and look at all the rock stars that are from the 70s and 80s and 90s, but I like the really older ones from the 70s and 80s that are all of a sudden going back out on tour.
Well, music is actually a perfect example, because with pirating and CDs and iPods and everything else, the fact is putting out an album is no longer the way that you make money as a musician. So many musicians are now giving away the music for free so they could make money on what's surrounding it, the tour and the merchandise and everything else.
Yeah, exactly. Gene Simmons is one of the people who does it perfectly.
Oh, Gene Simmons is a genius. Can I just tell you that? And it's not that I'm even a huge fan of the music or of the man or anything else, but oh my God, he is a genius.
Yeah, he's a marketing god.
Yeah.
And it's really funny that, because I've been watching his show and following, what he does for the past few years, all of a sudden I'm seeing other musicians suddenly that haven't been around doing anything for a while, and I'm like, they watched Family Jewels. they watched what Gene was doing, because now all of a sudden there's this rock star coming out with a chain of restaurants that never did before. Oh, and I gotta say that we were watching an episode, and my boyfriend and I, and we were like, Gene Simmons needs a restaurant. He needs a restaurant chain. Don't you know, 2 weeks later, I saw a press release that he's opening a restaurant chain? And I'm like, well, that was about the only thing he hadn't done yet. You can get his face on almost anything, including Unmentionables. So, but that's what again, and when Kiss started out, they were in they wore the makeup.
Right.
And they wore the makeup to hide their identity. Mm-hmm. And then they eventually learned.
One of the key things about Kiss, Gene Simmons was the first person to trademark the name of his band so that he could sell merchandise and everything else. Even before everything else, he was already thinking that way. As he said, there were tons of bands named Kiss before they came along, but they trademarked it. Yep.
And to my point, they hid their identity. You didn't know who was behind the mask. Mm-hmm. And then they did come to a point, a lot of authors, they want to hide behind the mask. Kiss came to a point where they knew they had to be not in the makeup all the time, and they needed to let people connect with them personally so that they could grow as musicians and as a band and become even more spectacularly famous and rich than they were already.
Even richer, if such a thing were possible.
Even richer. Well, they've got a great legacy that they left for their kids. So, Alina, this has been awesome. Can you, once again, for our listeners that are listening via iTunes and didn't go to the website to get this, can you give them a couple of website links so that they know where they can go and find you?
Absolutely. The primary one is alinaadams.com or alinaadamsmedia.com, and Alina spelled Alina. You can also find me at soapopera451.com, which has the message boards that I mentioned earlier for Counterpoint. And you can find me on Twitter at soapopera451, as well as Facebook at Alina Adams Media.
Love it. I want to thank you so much for being my guest this evening, and I hope to do a follow-up with you in a couple of months to see how some of these projects worked out.
Oh, I'd love that.
And as always, listeners, you can go to BookGoodies.com and you can look up Alina Adams to find this podcast. And you can leave us comments and, suggestions for future shows. And if you are an author that would like to be on one of our podcasts, we have a Contact Us link at the top of BookGoodies.com. And there's also a Tell Us About Your Book link where you can go in and give us the details about your books, and we will get that posted to our website. You can also find us at BookGoodies twitter.com/BookGoodies, and Facebook.com/BookGoodies. And you can find me at twitter.com/Loxley, Loxly. And you can also find me at my own personal website, which is DeborahCarney.com. As always, we want to thank Geekcast.fm, GeekCast.fm, for hosting all of our podcasts, and where you can go to find other really fun podcasts about affiliate marketing and internet marketing and just all things marketing. Lots of really great podcasts there. So I want to thank everyone for listening. So sit down, get writing, and have a great day.